Hello, Consciously Parenting family. Welcome to the Conscious Coffee Break. I'm Jen Kobrick. I'm a holistic family consultant with the Consciously Parenting Project, and today we're talking about choice. Specifically, we're talking about choice and reframing the things that we do out of a sense of obligation, that we feel like I have to do that and I hate it. We might feel resentful about these things, and choosing to reframe them as a choice both opens up some creativity about other choices that we could be making, and also maybe opens up a little bit of space to examine, with curiosity, examine whatever it is that's coming up for us when it comes to doing that task that's making it so hard. So I'm going to talk about this today from the framework of a specific example that came up recently in a conversation with a friend. And so I want to preface this by saying that I recognize that in the specific circumstance that I'm talking about and the specific possible alternative choices that I talk about, that there's a huge amount of privilege in this situation. There is a partner who could be asked to help. There's the financial means to make some other choices. And there's, ideas about how many options are available that might not be available to every person watching this. And so I want to say that up front because I don't want you to feel like if you don't have all of these options available to you, that means that this as a concept can't be useful. Because the idea of this is that we want to be bringing curiosity and creativity into the places where we're feeling stuck, where we're feeling a lack of agency, where we're feeling a lack of choice. And the exact options that might be available in any particular circumstances, any particular situation are going to be different. So part of why this is really important is because a lot of us grew up without having a whole lot of choice about our own lives, a whole lot of agency. And so we have an idea that we've internalized that we have no choice, that we have one path set out in front of us and that we have to do that path. We can't deviate from it. And this usually comes from a really deep-seated survival place. We had to do things a certain way in order to stay in connection with our caregivers, in order to get our needs met. And so it was really important that we do things in the way that allowed us to get those survival needs met. And it's now really hard sometimes to see outside of that framework and to see that there's any other possibilities than the ones in front of us, or that our needs might still get met if we change course. So the specific circumstance that I'm going to talk about is about doing the dishes, which I'm guessing that a lot of people watching this can relate to the idea that doing the dishes is not a whole lot of fun. And if you have kids and a partner and a family full of people, then there's probably a lot of dishes being generated in your household. And I imagine that even if you have the most helpful family in the world, that there's not very many people who truly enjoy doing dishes. And if you do, then, like I said before, we're less concerned about the specific circumstance than about the framework that I'm talking about here. So the conversation goes that my friend was really tired of doing the dishes and was, sort of venting about how frustrating it is to be constantly having dishes and have them, more appearing as fast as they get washed. And she sort of jokingly said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of this and I want to quit. And I sort of said, okay, so do that. And this is where the conversation gets interesting, because in my friend's mind, there is no choice about what doing the dishes looks like. And so as soon as I say, okay, so don't do them, She's going, yeah, like that solves anything. Then there's just going to be more piling up, and they're going to be all over the counter, and they're going to get smelly, and nobody will have clean things to eat off of. And, and this is where the brain goes, is all of these reasons why we can't. And when we can bring some curiosity to it and some creativity, so there's these two pieces. So the one piece is being curious about what are the things coming up in our brains telling us we can't. And the other piece is the creativity of thinking of all the ridiculous possible answers and what ifs. So for me, I like to start with that part and then go to the curiosity, but really it can be either direction or both at the same time. So in this case, if, the response is, I can't do that, then there'll be dishes all over the counter and they'll be smelly. And so then I'm going, okay, and what would happen if there were dishes all over the counter and they were smelly? Or what would happen if you use disposable dishes for a while? Or what would happen if you stopped cooking and ate freezer meals for a while? Or what would happen if you asked somebody else in your family to be the one to do the dishes? Or what would happen if you only used dishes that could go in the dishwasher and didn't use any pots or pans or things that needed to be hand washed for a while? And we can get totally ridiculous at this. What if you just smashed dishes instead of washing them and got new ones? And my point in saying that is not that that's a realistic solution. My point in saying that is that the idea here is to get ridiculous, because the more ridiculous you get, the more you get out of this stuck, resentful, angry place where you can't think of possibilities. Because as we start laughing or reflecting on how ridiculous something is, the more we get into a more creative frame of mind. So the goal is to get ridiculous. The goal is to get outside of reality with how crazy of possible alternative choices we get to. So then the part about curiosity comes in, and we start looking at, we've made this list of all these possibilities from the mundane to the ridiculous. And now when we look at what comes up in response to these possibilities, that's where this gets really interesting. So when we look at the possibility of just don't do the dishes for a few days and let them pile up and get smelly. And maybe the response that comes up to that is then, what are people going to think of me if there's piles of dirty dishes all over my house? And so then there's a piece that we can look at and go, okay, so I'm making this decision to wash the dishes every day because I'm afraid of the judgment that might come from someone else. Is that how I really want to make decisions in my life? Is the judgment from someone else important enough to me that I want to make a decision on that basis? What about using disposable dishes for a while? If the response that comes up to that is, oh my God, that's so terrible for the environment, then we can look at that and say, okay, so doing something that's better for the environment is important to me. Is it more important to me to do something that's good for the environment than it is to do something that's good for my mental health? If we look at asking someone else to help do the dishes in the household, then maybe something comes up about, well, I try to ask my husband to help, but he is never willing, and it just turns into a fight, and he thinks it should be no problem for me to do the dishes and take care of the kids, and I feel like he's a lazy bum who never gets up off the couch in the evenings. And so then maybe what we're realizing is that it's not actually the dishes that are the problem. It's actually that when we do the dishes, we're reminded of how we've been asking for help and not getting the help that we need, and that there's this festering conflict about who's doing what and how the family dynamics are structured and there's this fight that's happening that we're reminded of every time we do the dishes. And so the resentment's maybe not actually about the dishes themselves. It's actually about this other unfinished thing that we're being reminded of by the dishes. So these are just some examples of some of the possible things that might come up when contemplating alternative choices. So you might be thinking like, yeah, but none of those are realistic choices. Like, I'm going to look at all of those and I'm going to, in the end, decide to do the dishes. And that's kind of the point, is not that you'll necessarily actually choose something different. And you might in contemplating these things realize, oh, actually, I would be happier if I did a big pile of dishes every 3 days instead of a little pile of dishes every day. That would be better for my mental health, and I would rather choose my mental health than the fear of judgment from my mother-in-law. So if that's what you realize in this process, if you realize, actually, I'm making a decision that is not in accordance with my highest values, my true beliefs about what's important in life, then you might choose a different path. You might actually change what you do. And you might, in looking at all of these things, realize, actually, it sounds worse to do a big pile of dishes every 3 days. I'd rather, knock out this smaller pile every day. And I don't want to use disposable dishes because the environment is more important to me. It's worth this, this 15 minutes of my time every day to do something that's better for the environment. And, and as you've gone through this process, you become more clear about what are the things that are most important to me. And then the key thing is, even if you end up doing exactly the same thing that you were doing before, you're doing it by choice now. Choosing to do that thing rather than feeling like there are no alternatives, no other possibilities. This comes up all the time in parenting. And a lot of times in parenting, the alternative possibilities seem a lot less possible, which is part of why I'm using the framework of something like dishes to talk about this, because those alternatives will feel less morally wrong to most people than alternatives like, I'm tired of changing diapers, so an alternative action could be to just leave the baby in a poopy diaper for hours. And I think everyone listening to this can agree that that's not really an okay choice. But the reasons why that's not an okay choice are the reasons why we make the choice to go ahead and change the diaper. So the idea of framing this as a choice is not that we necessarily are actually going to do anything different. It's to get clear on all of the reasons why we're doing the thing that we're doing so that we can do it on purpose by choice, instead of with this nebulous sense of, I don't want to be doing this, but I don't feel like I have a choice. So even with something like, I don't want to change a poopy diaper, leaving your baby in a poopy diaper is a choice you could make. You could do that. And you're probably thinking, I don't want my child to get a rash. I don't want them to be in pain. I don't want to have to smell it. All of these things, right? And all of those things are important and are illustrating that you value caring for your child. You value their comfort. You value your own comfort. You value their cleanliness. You value their health. And so you can make a choice that actively supports all of those values by changing the poopy diaper. Even if changing a poopy diaper is gross and you don't really want to do it, we can choose to make a choice to do something that's hard and maybe not fun because it supports our values. But we can only make that choice when we're very clear about what our values are and which choice supports those values. So if you have questions about this, if you need help getting outside of your own head in order to think creatively or bring some of that curiosity, we do that a lot on Healing Story Circles. That's a great place to bring some of that sense of lightness and curiosity and introspection, and be heard and be supported, be validated. in how hard it is to do the things that are not so much fun sometimes. So please join us for a Healing Story Circle, reach out for one-on-one support. And if you have questions or comments, of course, you can always put them in the comments and we'll get back to you. Have a great week, and I will see you on the next coffee break.